That's all we can hope to do with our mistakes, right? Figure out how to do it better next time.
That's right. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tim Markle, and I am the director of the Southern Regional Center, Children and Youth with Special Health Care Needs. And this is Conversations on Showing Up for Kids. This is part two of a conversation that we started out about a month ago, and the conversation went so well that I wanted to have these people back with me again, because we didn't get to cover everything that I wanted to cover so that families have the information they need to help navigate the system that's out there. Just want to remind people that we are being recorded, and everybody who is on the call knows that we are being recorded. That does mean that we're going to try our best to not talk about any personal identifiable information, because as we know, anything out on the web remains there forever. Also, I am not a doctor or a legal expert. We're simply having a conversation between people. So please just understand that level as well. And as it always goes, enough about me. I want to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. And we're going to get into talking more in depth about a program that we were only able to mention last time. So first, let's just start with Holly. Introduce yourself, the project you work for, and then we'll move on.
Okay. Thank you for the time and the opportunity to talk to everybody about these important programs, Tim. I appreciate it. My name is Holly O'Higgins. I'm the Universal Service Fund Director at the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. And the program I spoke about during our episode 1 was the Lifeline program that provides discounts to people who are low income on their phone bills. And more information can be found on the previous episode.
Great. And if we have any questions that have come up in between then, Holly, I'm so glad you're here. We can retouch on that program. Also maybe understand how people who sign up for one, how might they discover about the other, or if there's any interaction, like if you and Billy ever talk. And, we'll talk about that a little bit. I have a feeling you do. Billy, would you care to introduce yourself?
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Billy Malden. I am speaking through an interpreter. I'm the TRS and TEP administrator for the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. Thank you, Tim, for letting us participate in this infamous show.
Oh, I like that. We're a show today. I like it. I like it. And could you introduce yourself, please?
Hey everyone, thanks for having me back today. My name is Becca Weiland and I'm the program coordinator at the Well Badger Resource Center.
We'll hear a little bit more about the Well Badger Resource Center a little bit later on, but I want to start with Billy today. So Billy, you use some fun acronyms there that I must admit, I do not know what they stand for. So could you explain a little bit more about the program that you're talking about that helps people with disabilities?
Sure. First of all, with those acronyms, TRS is Telecommunication Relay Service for people who are deaf and hard of hearing that use like 711, such as the TTY, to connect with a voice consumer, which is not something we're going to be talking about today. Today we're going to focus on TEP, which is the Telecommunications Equipment Purchase Program. I've explained part of it on the previous conversation, a more high-level overview of it, but it's a voucher program for any resident of Wisconsin with a disability to purchase telecommunications equipment, allowing access to basic communications. In other words, we call this distance communication, which means email, could be virtual like Skype, Zoom, FaceTime, texting, anything that would help with telecommunications or distance communications. It's a voucher program, and there are 6 disability categories that you can qualify under: hard of hearing, all the way down to mobility concerns or limitations, as well as deaf blind. I'll go through and expand on each of those categories later. I just wanted to open it up. Tim, if you had any more questions on that particular part, otherwise I can go ahead and give you some examples of various consumers and how they utilize each of those categories to get their needs filled.
Well, I am assuming that there are a lot of different equipment choices and that you work it to individualize to the consumer. So why don't we go ahead and as you discuss the different consumer categories, maybe if you just mention a couple common equipment usages so people get an idea about what you mean by equipment.
Sure, definitely.
Great.
All the information I want to also mention is on our PSC website. So I can share a link with you, Tim, and then that can be passed along as well.
Thank you.
So that information is there, plus the application and the equipment list is used just as a guide for the consumers to help have them understand what would be most beneficial under each category. For example, the voucher for each category is also a different amount. So let's start with the hard of hearing category. So a hard of hearing person might have like a mild hearing loss. They would qualify for a $100 voucher. And the reason why $100 was deemed appropriate was because that's sufficient to cover an amplified telephone, which is a common piece of equipment used by someone who is hard of hearing. All they need is just to increase the volume level. So they can go to the store or find something online of an amplified phone that would fit their needs. Each hard of hearing person, though, does function differently. Some amplified phones work on low tones or high tones. So there's different purposes. So it is important that the consumers test out the equipment to feel or to find out which one really fits their needs. The next category is severely hard of hearing or deaf. Someone like myself would qualify. I don't hear anything. Most popularly known a device would be like a flasher for to allow them to access their phone, know that their phone's ringing or that the doorbell's ringing. It's an alerting system. So flashers are very popular. Also, it could be that they're getting an incoming call, as an example. Some phones have really loud tones if you have someone severely hard of hearing or deaf. So if you were in the house, it actually might hurt your ears if you don't have a hearing loss. But for those who have that much of a decibel loss, it would be more appropriate for them. One disability category is speech disabled, and that popular equipment that they use is AAC, or an augmentative and alternative communication app. So it's really known as like a communication app. So that's for someone who maybe doesn't speak, and they can use an iPad or any smart device, touch on various pictures or symbols, and that will then voice for them. So that's an example. And I do want to stop too to see if there's any further questions at this time.
The question that comes to mind is you mentioned the testing it out and trying to make sure that it's working for whatever, like hearing loss or whatever the disability might be. How does that work? Is somebody coming out to the home in this time of COVID? We're scared of people coming into our houses. Is someone coming out? Is it cost free to send things back and forth? How does someone test out the equipment?
Great question. Yeah, we're in a new era right now, right? We have to think outside of our box, and we have to be able to address those needs. So as a good example, I work very closely with independent living centers. The independent living centers throughout the state are a total of 8, and they oftentimes are unfamiliar with the consumers that use this program. But let's say you are having a difficult time, like you have a car accident and you overnight lost some mobility. You might go to independent living centers first as a one-stop resource initially to get some assistance. And then the ILCs, or independent living centers, have a room or an equipment room so they can go and test out the equipment there to meet their needs. So that can be provided there, but a lot of them are shut down now. So testing of the equipment is tough with COVID. It's not only affected Wisconsin, but of course on a national level. Sometimes equipment has been mailed, like demo equipment, so they can get test it out at home and see what they like, and then they mail it back, and then they, have to clean that device and make sure it's safe for the next. But protocols are being developed all the time to try and fill those gaps and those needs. There are storefronts or vendors, authorized vendors that are allowed to sell the equipment under our program. They're reviewed, they're screened, vetted, and then approved to provide the equipment. They have limited hours of opening. It's really word of mouth that helps to get that information out so they know where they can go and test out the equipment. But you're right now it is a challenging time. We're working extra hard and really rolling up our sleeves to making sure that this is available and people are aware and able to continue to try to get what they need. We're always educating, advertising, but a lot of it now is through virtual means.
Let's go ahead to the other three categories, I think.
Sure. Yeah, and really I can go through them briefly. Like I said, hard of hearing, then we have the deaf or severely hard of hearing. Then deaf low vision would be a third category. Low vision would be someone who is like, it's not like someone who can just take on and off their glasses and have vision changes, but it's someone who has vision loss no matter glasses or without. They have enlarged text and other devices that help them throughout their day. Then we have deaf blind, we have speech disabled, and then mobility impaired. So that would be all 6 categories. Some equipment examples for the mobility limited category would just maybe they are unable to move at all and they just use their eye gaze. So you would have the individual be sitting in front of a computer or some type of similar device, and they have a sensor that tracks the eye movement to pick out the words that person wanted to use for communication or to type out in an email or a text. So it's all eye gaze based. Deaf blind, they have braille equipment available. So those are some other popular examples.
So what is so I am now very intrigued, just so you know, because I think of, as you said, communication these days is in these group rooms, over Skype, it's computer based, it's cell phone based. So what are sort of, I can't imagine, but maybe I'm wrong. I can't imagine that the TEP program comes in and provide, all the computers and the software and the hardware for eye gaze devices and a computer that connects then to the internet and the software. What and maybe I'm wrong, but so what does TEP help provide?
So again, we have eligible equipment lists. So I would refer you to see what would fit for each category. And it's telecommunications related, again, I want to emphasize that. There is a clause within the equipment list that says, if you see something that's not on our list, but we can consider it case by case. Oftentimes, these days, technology is developing daily and new enhancements are being made. So we have that flexibility built into the program to provide it case by case. Computers are not something that we would probably provide. In a unique situation, it could be considered a laptop, for example, but we also would refer, eyes gaze devices. Typically, they already have their computer or their laptop, and then the eye gaze, like the accessory, would be added in to the monitor. So we would pay for the accessory. It's not an all-in-one thing. As another example, so I have my smart device with me right here. It's an iPhone as an example. Sorry, I have to give props to Apple, but this wouldn't be approved for hard of hearing, but it might be approved for deaf categories. And the reason why, like, anyone can have a smart device, right? It's just considered a regular, normal piece of equipment, so it's not specialized for communication for deaf. You could buy it anywhere, and we wouldn't approve it, but it's allowing a deaf person to use video relay service to make phone calls, so I can call through an interpreter to a hearing counterpart on my cell phone. But if a hard of hearing person wants it, they wouldn't qualify because they don't use interpreting services if they don't sign, but they could use it with captioning. So the features and the apps allow the iPhones to be a specialized piece of equipment that we would provide or approve. So again, if someone with a mild hearing loss going into the store and say, hey, I want an iPhone and TUP's going to pay for it, we will allow that. We have a screening process to make sure that it's really the best fit for what they need. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And let's talk just briefly about that screening process. Like how does someone determine that they're eligible? Does someone then help them pare down the list of equipment? Because I mean, I know I see lists of things that I'm like, I don't even know what half the stuff is. So how am I supposed to know if it's useful for me or not? What sort of help is available to the consumer to figure out what does work best and what would work for them?
Well, yeah, so we have the vendors, the approved vendors, as I mentioned, and they go through a screening process to make sure that they have staff qualified to do a basic analysis of the consumer's needs and functions to make sure that they have products that would appropriately meet their needs. Obviously, they're trying to sell their products, but we also make sure that they have the assessments that are appropriate for them as well. Deaf and hard of hearing is probably the easiest. Amplified phone is going to be a typical device, but it's really it's dependent on the individual and what they work with the best. So a hard of hearing voucher, the vendor's going to say, well, that's not going to work for this type of device. If you really don't hear that well, you may want to go into the deaf and severely hard of hearing category. There's a $700 difference in those categories. So that allows you much more access into various devices. Independent living centers, as I mentioned before, ILCs, also provide assessments for consumers that go in, test out the equipment, and they have consultants there who have experience using the various technology as well. Again, from the basic case to much more complicated cases that have multiple devices that are being considered for mobility and speech limitations. Sometimes that's all inclusive. So it really is an in-depth analysis for that situation to provide various pieces of equipment to meet the person's needs. I didn't mention this in the beginning, but the TEP voucher program is good for 3 years. So after 3 years, you can reapply and receive a new voucher. So let's say the first time the person gets some pieces of equipment and it doesn't work for them, they don't use it, they then do have to wait for another 3 years to qualify for a new voucher. So we do caution the consumers, making sure that they do their best to test out what they think is going to work for them.
For the eligibility, is it like a medical diagnosis needed, or do the independent living centers determine the level of disability? And so how do people get placed in one category or the other?
I'm very happy you asked that. And I'm really proud about this part of our program. It's a well-respected aspect of our program from other states as well. It's all self-identification. We're empowering the consumer
Oh,
which category they identify with the most. So they can go online, apply, and say, you know what, I'm hard of hearing. But maybe they're not. Maybe they are more deaf than they want to admit to. But they can choose whatever they want. There's no medical documentation required, whereas other states do require a signed audiogram or other proof of a hearing loss, which is a good screen to have as well. But a lot of times we found that our residents can't afford to go and get those tests done, or they don't know what to do. And they maybe get the signed documentation, but then they have to fax it or attach it. It's just more of an obstacle and a barrier. So we do have an honor system here in Wisconsin, and it's been working out since 1996. There hasn't been a lot of fraudulent activity on that aspect of it. We do monitor it monthly to just keep an eye on things, but overall, it's been great. I've caught a few suspicious things, tackled them individually, but I don't see in the future ever changing that part of our eligibility. However, our administrative code does allow us through a right there to ask for further documentation of their disability if we suspect any suspicious activity. That's only that's only happened once in several years. So.
And where does the funding come from to pay for the equipment? Because who's funding the vouchers?
So TEP is under the Universal Service Fund. It's one of the programs. And the USF is actually Holly's ballpark, with various programs falling in that realm. And it's actually an assessment from the telephone providers. So the companies pay into the USF, and then there's money then allocated to TEP, which is why our equipment must be telecommunications related, because it's taxed off of the telephone providers. You can't just come up and buy any source of equipment. A good example is that oftentimes people misunderstand or misconceive, and they want to get a doorbell or a visual smoke alarm. And that's not telecommunications equipment, so we can't approve that. However, oftentimes the vendors sell them in bundles. One system that will alert you visually flashing to your phone, your baby crying, your smoke alarm, your doorbell, all will be built into one device. We can approve that because it's also letting you know that you have an incoming call. I hope I didn't confuse you any further, did I?
No, that's perfect. And it leads me back to Holly and you with this question of integration. So from the outside, it looks to me like this should be this beautiful system that someone is struggling with telecommunication and they need specific equipment. And so they go to TEP and they're able to get a voucher to access the equipment. So they put the equipment in, but then they have trouble with actually accessing the telecommunications because of the affordability of internet or wideband or telephone itself. And so then they need to go to Holly. So is there an intersection between the two programs to make sure that the people that are getting the equipment are also getting offered the discounted telephone service?
Well, many of the vendors who receive funding through the not-for-profit program also will refer folks who are working with the TEP program either on equipment evaluation or as a vendor. what have you, they can refer folks to the Lifeline program, and they generally understand the relatedness of the two pieces. The difference, of course, being that for Lifeline, you have to be low income and have other eligibility guidelines that are established by the federal government. So not everybody is going to fall into that category and be eligible for Lifeline, but many of the vendors who work with Billy's program with TEP understand that and do refer folks to Lifeline. So we're working on a more aggressive integration piece, but it's not at fruition yet.
But I think you make a great point, and it's a point of clarification that there is no income restrictions for the TEP program. I want to highlight that. However, there is $100 copay for every disability category except for hard of hearing. So that is something to keep in mind. If you cannot afford the $100 copay, then you can reach out to a program called TAP, another fancy acronym for you, TAP, Telecommunications Assistance Program, which is housed under the Office for Deaf and Hard of Hearing in the Department of Health Services. So you can apply for TAP assistance, and then they will help to cover the $100 copay that the 5 disability categories require for TEP. And so you have income requirements for that to qualify.
Can I just add to that? If you have a customer who is a person with a mobility or speech impairment and is not eligible for the TAP program that Billy just mentioned, and if they're working with one of our grantees that receives not-for-profit grant funding to pay that copay, they may be able to have that copay funded. But it really depends upon the vendor. And so we'd really encourage folks in that situation to call me or to call Billy to make sure they know which resources would be the best for them, because there are some geographic limitations as to where those vendors are located.
I'm going to, again, do the thing that people in interview type format should never do. And that's a question that I have no idea the answer to. Okay, so everybody prepare. So Billy, the program that Southern Regional Center works with are basically children from birth to 21. Now that obviously includes adults 18 and over. So are children eligible through their family to be able to get some telecommunication assistance equipment help for when they're old enough to start to use a phone, or nowadays attend school virtually? Or is it all dependent on the parent? So how does that eligibility work?
There is no restriction on age. We typically see requests starting at age 3 or up. That's a common requirement for other programs. So I have rarely seen anyone younger than that requesting information. Just as you said, they don't understand how to use it at that point. But let's say they live in the same house. They have a family member that has several people that are deaf in the same household. It wouldn't matter. We would focus on the individual, so it's not like a household voucher. It's an individual voucher.
Thank you. That was I was almost afraid to ask the question, because if it was a household voucher, I'd have to sit here and be upset. So I'm glad that it's an individual voucher. That's I just, the more I hear about the program, the more I love it. Any final thing, Holly? Is there anything that we haven't covered that you may want to talk about quickly, or Billy, anything that the questions have brought up before we transition to Becca a little bit?
I actually would like to wrap up and get this over to Becca soon, so she has some time in the spotlight. So yeah, that's good.
I agree. We need to move it on to Becca. However, I'll just add one very quick thing, which is that Billy and I are both very open to being contacted and asked questions of and be of assistance in whatever way is appropriate. So please don't hesitate to do so.
See, and I love that. I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, there's this cool program, here's our 800 number. And it's a different thing to say, hey, we really want this to work for you. You have questions, call us. We are there to help you figure this out. So thank you for that. And so as we're getting into these discussions about Lifeline and TEP and programs to help low income people, programs to help people with disabilities, it struck me as there's this intersection too between people with disabilities who are also low income, and that there's like this the system set out to try to help people who have low income, and there's systems set out for people who try to help people with disabilities. But sometimes people don't think of the two systems together. And so I'm thinking there's probably some families out there who would benefit from these two programs as well as other social service programs that might be out there. But how do they find out about them? So Becca, tell me a little bit about Well Badger.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I get into that, I just want to say thank you to Billy and Holly to learning more about your program. It's gotten the certified resource specialist in me super excited. I love hearing about your guys' programs, and also just thinking of future cases that here at Will Badger will see, and hopefully making those referrals to you folks. So, but thank you, Tim. So, for those who don't know, Well Badger is a health information referral service. We have certified resource specialists staffed on the phones, email, text, Facebook, all the good stuff, Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. We really try to be very accessible. And if you need to contact us after hours, please do so. We'll get back to you the next day. So we like to think of ourselves too as a one-stop shop, exactly for the reasons that you're pointing out, Tim. You know, we have a huge directory, online directory with thousands of accurate and verified resources statewide. So you can call anywhere in Wisconsin. We operate in all counties. And you just tell us your story. Let us know what you're thinking about, what's on your mind, what are you looking for. We love to help connect folks to what's around them and what's accessible. We're talking about low income, but and here specifically we're talking about telecommunications, right? But maybe that's not just have financial assistance questions, right? Maybe you're also trying to figure out how you're going to feed your family this week. Give us a call because we'll help you identify some programs you might be eligible for. That could be the food share program. That could also be the program if you happen to be a pregnant person or breastfeeding, or you have children under the age of 5. We could also help try to make some food pantries near you. But more than just food assistance too, you know, if you have any questions about health coverage, or you want to know how to apply for insurance, give us a call. We'll help screen you through that too and see what your options are. And although we do work a lot with connecting people to different, programs like WIC or Badger Care Plus, Food Share, Wisconsin Shares 2, Wisconsin Works, we try to find creative solutions to help you out as well. So maybe you just want to know where you can access a free crib for your baby, right? I'm trying to think of other things along these lines here too, but we try to find these creative solutions to help meet your needs, because we know that there's not just one problem going on. There might not be one issue, or you might not just have one need. You know, they're all connected in a sense. So if there's a way we might be able to connect you to resources to help free up money, so that you can use that the way you need to, we're happy to help. Also along that too, we're talking about kids here a little bit too with that last question that Tim had asked. So if you've got kiddos at home and they have special healthcare needs, we work very closely with regional centers. We'd be glad to get you connected over there, have discussions about what they do over there. Also, there's different programs to help support your families with your kids. So, there's programs like the Children's Long-Term Support Waiver or the Children's Community Option Program. Let's have a conversation about that. Or if you don't qualify for Badger Care, but you want to help get your kid connected to the Katie Beckett program, that's another way to access Medicaid services too. So let's talk about that as well, see how that might be able to benefit you and your family. Although we are mainly health and social services, everything seems to be health and social service related, I think. So bring your questions over here. We're happy to help. We're happy to talk, and we're happy to get you transferred over to the agencies that are ready and ready to help for you and your family.
That's great. Yeah, when I think of health and and support services or human services, it's like that's life.
Right.
This encompasses my life. Is what we're talking about. Um, so can I just put a scenario out and see if this would work? So let's say a consumer is low income and they get in touch with Holly and they're eligible for the Lifeline program. And in that discussion, Holly finds out that they're also disabled. And so they may have a disability that may affect, they may be able to be helped by Billy's program. So Holly, you would be able to refer that person to Billy?
Yes, I would.
Okay, so then Billy helps them with finding the equipment that they'll need to help their telecommunication needs. Billy knows that life with disabilities is more than just telecommunication, and that there may be the need to for some other assistance. And so then Billy could refer the consumer to the independent living centers, but also then to Well Badger, who can sit there and say, okay, let's talk a little bit about your life and all the different aspects of your life and see where we might be able to help. And hey, if we're talking a child under 18, under 21, we also have regional centers that we work with. Is that a viable scenario? Is that the way the system can work?
I say yes. I think
I say it depends. Yeah.
Well,
go
and,
ahead.
yeah.
And I'm
Not
seeing
only in that
wherever they
order.
enter.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Holly. What was that?
I'm saying not only in that order, it can also help it. They can contact whomever first, and we can all make sure that we're part of the cycle to make sure folks are connected with the most appropriate resources for them.
That is fantastic. Because this is communication these days is key. I mean, it's now our social lifeline, are our communication devices. This is our main way of socializing. And so I appreciate the fact that there are programs out there that can help. Final thoughts, comments, clips, cartoons, anything that might be out there that you would have. Becca, anything else from Well Badger?
I just kind of want to echo what Holly said about there's no particular order. Personally, I just get really excited when I know that agencies and programs and partners can work together. Accessibility is key, especially now more than ever. We're living in a pandemic. And so I'm very grateful for the technology that we do have today. And Billy mentioned earlier, too, how technology is changing every day. So to me, I just get really excited and hopeful. Maybe we can help at least one person a day, right? But more than that, of course. So I just want to say thank you guys so much for all the work that you do. And again, for having me here.
Well, thank you, Becca.
Yeah, and we do see many requests more and more now for kids with the virtual learning and accessibility to those devices. But I want to mention that schools are also in response for that. It's school district's responsibility. So we've been seeing more requests, and I'm happy that TEP can provide some assistance. But again, going back to the key is it has to be telecommunications, so email, call, distance communications. But the school has a part in that as well.
Absolutely. Well, this has been two really interesting discussions. And for me, this is one of the best ways that I learn. And so I've known about Lifeline and TEP for a few years. Now I feel like I understand a bit more about Lifeline and TEP. So I'm hoping that other people will listen to this and be able to learn the same way that I was learning. So thank you all very, very much. If you want to hold on to the line, I'm going to stop the recording, which hopefully will not disappear into another world, and then make a more informal goodbye. But for now, thank you all very, very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.